Hi, everyone. I'm Michael, the program manager, and I'm here with Harris. Harris, can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Where are you calling from? What is your job position? And could you tell me the company that you work for?
Sure, yeah. My name is Harris Foster. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I currently now live in Austin, Texas, and I'm the community manager for a independent game studio named Finji. We've produced a few games that you can buy right now on your Xbox or your PlayStation, your Switch, including a little road trip game called Overland, and most famously a narrative adventure kind of young adult fiction game called Night in the Woods.
Okay, awesome. So every time I do this, I always start from the very beginning of somebody's, I guess, journey to where they got to today. So could you tell me what did you want to be whenever you were in middle school or high school? I don't know why I wanted to be a firefighter for some reason. Boy, has that changed. But could you go ahead and tell me about that?
Sure, yeah, it's kind of interesting. When I starting in elementary school, I played Halo, which is like it's a shooting game, like military space, all this crazy stuff. A little bit out of my suggested age range, but um, it kind of opened my eyes to video games as this like artistic medium. And there was a DVD that came with Halo 2 that had like behind the scenes footage. And they talked to the makers of the video games. And when I saw that, like, oh, there's like people making these games, that's when I kind of learned that I wanted to work in video games. As I got into middle school and high school, that's kind of when you find your strengths and weaknesses as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that I was like really good at talking, but not good at math or programming or art, the kind of things that you think of when it comes to video games. So I really put resources into trying to place myself in an industry where my strengths weren't the greatest. And through that, I found the role of community manager, which is everything I wanted to be with video games. So, what a community manager like me does is we essentially run the social media accounts, your Twitter, Instagram, all that, Discord. We also, create content that will inspire people to play our games, to learn more about our games, to get a fan of one game to like another game. And essentially, you are a paid fan of your own studio. You are the person who gets other people just as excited as you are about playing video games. And in high school, I was always telling friends about which game they should play next, and people would come to me and ask questions about video games.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always something that I did for friends, and I learned that I could be, taking it a step further and making it my career. So I was fortunate enough to be able to like go to game conventions and meet up with friends who I met online through video games, and um, learn about what it takes to be a professional in the video games world from a young age. And there's a whole bunch of stories about making games for like promoting games for companies, lying about my age, saying I'm way older than I was as a high schooler. um but we'll leave that out. Moral of the story is, I saw this career goal that I wanted, and I just pushed myself into it and learned how I could benefit the industry so that it could benefit me. And yeah, that all started, no joke, in middle school.
Okay, interesting. So, what did you do right after high school? Did you go into the work industry or did you go into college? Did you have a gap year? Tell me about what that was like.
So an interesting thing about the video games industry is, um, you don't necessarily need a college degree to do well in video games. It doesn't hurt, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
in the world of video games, it is very clear whether or not you know the business or you don't know the business. And I was convinced in high school that I was ready to go into video games and that I knew the business and that, I could just jump from high school to video games. And my parents, who were very into the idea of me going to college, kind of pushed me away from that. Said, "Hey, give college a try. Let's see how it goes." So I went to a small college here in Austin called St. Edward's University,
Hmm.
and I started off in their video game development program. They had a program separated into two sides. It was video games creative and video games business. And I thought, hey, video games business, that's perfect for me. Um, and this is where the knowledge of the games industry that I, very voluntarily took in middle school and high school kind of came into play because as I got into this program, I realized this program is not up to standard. It's not at a place where I feel like I am getting the most out of my education. Having a critical eye of your education is super important, not because it can make you bitter, but because you can use it to push yourself in a direction that you want to go in.
Hmm.
So I, you know, got out of this video game development program, switched to a communication degree, which is like marketing and PR in a more general sense. Graduated with that. In the middle there, I interned at a game studio in Houston. And following graduation, I graduated college in 2017. Following that, I worked at a small online game studio for a bit, and then I got a job here at Finji.
Okay. So you mentioned that internship. Could you tell me about how you found and applied for that internship? Because whenever I got into college, I honestly didn't know that internships were for everyone. I
Mhm.
always thought it was only upperclassmen or seniors. So could you tell me more about that internship?
Yeah, I had that internship between sophomore and junior year of college, I believe. Um, and it was a 6 hour a day, I believe, internship where I did community management. I assisted in community management. Um, watched as the existing community managers did work for a studio that is now closed called 6 Foot Games. It
Mm.
also sometimes, depending on what project they were working on, they would go by a different name called Gray Box. And Yeah, having that internship was really valuable because it, put me into, it had me, it was basically practice, it was practice for doing the job so that when I began applying for jobs and, proving that I would be a valuable community manager, I knew I could get to these places and not screw up and fumble around and be completely in the dark on these things. How I got this internship is not super compelling. It was like my dad happened to hear about it from a friend that there was a game studio in a building that was across the street from his building, and so it was just a word of mouth kind of thing. But an internship, if you've got the time and the financial cushion to take part in an internship, it's
Mhm.
definitely something that can help you. Yeah.
So after that, you mentioned that you went and worked full time for a little bit, and then you worked for Finji. Tell me, or rather, tell us about how you got that job at Finji, because I remember I met you at PAX and I asked you that same exact thing, and it was
Yeah.
just fascinating story. So could you go ahead and tell us about that?
Yeah, of course. And this is where, so much value is present in, who you are as a person and how, eager you are to like do work that you're passionate about. So working at an MMO company that makes online games, and uh, Finji and my friend Felix working for them at the time are showing games down at a game convention in San Antonio. So I just messaged Felix on Twitter and I said like, "Hey, I saw you guys are going to be at San Antonio. Um, I have the weekend off. I was planning on going to the convention anyway, but if you need any help with, your booth, your if you need any help setting up, tearing down, let me know. I'd love to just move boxes for you.
Mm.
And Felix messaged me back and said hey, we need someone to work the booth the whole weekend. Would you be willing to study up on our library of games and market them to people for a weekend and just act as a volunteer? I was like, oh my gosh, I guess. Anything, the job I was in was a very low level customer service job. I was making not much more than someone who works at Target.
Mm.
But I was like, yes, anything to get me out of this monotony. So yeah, I'll come down. And so I get down there. I meet Rebecca, who is now my boss, and I spend a whole weekend selling T-shirts and marketing games and talking to people about how much they like these games, and just doing light community management because I loved it. And during that weekend, we would all go out to dinner and relax and unwind after a full day of standing on our feet in a loud convention hall selling T-shirts and whatnot. And I asked Rebecca, I just said, hey, what's your community management situation look like? And she thought on it and she said, well, we don't really have one right now. And I was like, oh, well, if you got any questions or anything, let me know. I didn't push too hard. I didn't want to wiggle my eyebrows or anything.
Mm.
But we have a good weekend. We all break off. And I ended up getting laid off from my job at the online game studio because they were running low on budget and they just had to cut people. And I was one of the people who got cut. And a couple days after that, I get an email from Rebecca who's offering me a job. And it's all because I met Felix through video games conventions that I went to for fun when I was in high school. Um, and yeah, Felix, much older than me. Not, they're gonna hate me for saying that. But my mentor in the games world, Felix told me about how when they met me in high school, when I was in high school, they said that when the day we met and you were goofing around and hanging out, I knew that we were going to work together one day. And that that's a really awesome feeling because it's having a job is a good thing, and it's really it's a proud moment when you can think all of the prep work and everything I've done has led to me successfully having a career.
Mm.
And yeah, really affirming moment. This job is incredible. And I'm still with them and don't plan on going anywhere.
That's a really fascinating story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before that Finji is. I'm aware of the difference way back. I don't know if you remember Indie Game the movie, but that's how I understood the difference between independent games and AAA and so on and so forth. But could you tell us a little bit about how Finji is different in that space? What differs
Sure.
between an independent developer, publisher versus the AAA?
Sure. So Finji is an independent developer and publisher. So just how the books you read have a writer and a publisher, games are the same way. Games will have a team make a game, and then another team who will publish the game, such as do marketing for them, provide them the access they need to get the game onto an Xbox, or a PlayStation, and basically help the game creators get the game out to people in mass.
Mm.
And we're used to games publishers being really big companies, like Activision or Electronic Arts. Um, and those are what we call in the games world AAA publishers. They're really big guys who have big corporate offices in lots of cities and all this stuff. And so with us at Finji, we're an independent publisher, which means we're very small. We're not controlled by an over like a board of directors and whatever, which just it's just us. It's just a small company. And with that, we make small games that are much lower in graphical fidelity, smaller teams making the games, shorter size, but they're still really enjoyable experiences.
Mhm.
A really popular independent game would be something like Undertale. If you've heard of that one. Um, and the difference with this is just access to funds and the team sizes, but the stories and experiences that we try to make for the players, we try to put a lot of heart and soul and you know unique gameplay aspects into these games that make us stand out from big games that come out every year and are kind of samey. Nothing, and not to say there's anything wrong with that. It's just like two different kind of ends of the field.
Mhm. Yeah. So tell me about the size of the team that you work with, because you mentioned you're in community management. I know, would you call it co-owners, Rebecca and Adam, I guess.
Yeah,
I know your team
co-founders.
is definitely grown. So could you tell me what your team is comprised of?
Sure. So our team, depending on the project and we're growing all the time. Uh, it's anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen people. We just hired someone new within the last month, who is our basically right hand person to Becca in terms of running the studio and helping Becca with finances and spreadsheets and all that fun stuff. And that's Emily, and she's terrific. Um, and it's a small, so it's such a small team that I could start naming people, but it's just big enough that if I forget somebody, I'm gonna get like just yelled at. So we have Adam and Becca, who are husband and wife, and they run the studio together. They founded it and run it. Adam is kind of in charge of the creative aspects and managing the games as a creative, and then Becca is in charge of finances and marketing and communication and things like that. And then we have testers who work with us to make sure all the games are up to quality. We have me in marketing and community management. Emily helps Becca. We have a sound producer. We have an on-staff programmer. Um, and yeah, it's just a tight little crew who everybody has like their specific hat that they're helping everybody with. And yeah, it's amazing what this small team is able to crank out. And then we make games uh, ourselves, and then we also help other teams publish. So
Mhm.
we're working with at least 5 teams to put out games or support games that we've already put out for them. Uh, just around the world, a lot of folks in Canada. We have John down in Australia. Um, we got it's a global business for us, despite the fact that all of us work from home. It's pretty neat.
So tell me, before COVID, what was your day to day duties like? Because you mentioned traveling to conventions, you
Mhm.
mentioned everybody works from home, and then you're a publisher, so you also have to seek out some games that you're interested in, some developers. So tell me, what is that like before COVID?
So pre-COVID, I was traveling about. I was getting on an airplane and going somewhere once every 6 weeks, just about. It would kind of average out to that. Some of these places would be games conventions to promote our games. So we would go to every PAX convention, the Penny Arcade Expo, which is where you and I met.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to the GDC, the Game Developers Conference, where that's more of a uh, industry sharing of knowledge convention. So I would go to watch like a talk being given about a given subject that I wanted to know more about. Um, and then there's things like E3, which is like the big video game convention every year, where they show off, all the new games and make a spectacle of it in Los Angeles. Um, and yeah, a lot of traveling. We would try to fly up to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where Adam and Becca live, about once or twice a year to just like work together under one roof. We found to
Mm-hmm.
be really effective. So effective, in fact, that Finji bought an office late last year and have
Oh,
really not been able to use it because of COVID.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, a lot of traveling. And then when I'm not traveling, I'm here working out of my office, where I will work on community management tasks. I'll capture footage of our games to use for advertising. I'll play updates of our games before they're out to like learn about them. Demos of our games. I'll take a look at other games we're looking at publishing and play that and give my feedback on that. Um, and just a lot of emails and spreadsheets. So yeah, that was my life pre-COVID. And then post-COVID, it's kind of been the same. We haven't had to. A lot of people will come into our community Discord or mention us on Twitter, and these are people who are excited about our upcoming games, and they'll say like, "Oh, I hope COVID hasn't affected development too much, and you're still on track, and you're still ready to, put the game out at a fast pace or the pace we're expecting." And I'm happy to tell people like, yeah, COVID hasn't really affected our development
Mm-hmm.
process much because we all already work from home anyway. I'm wearing pajama pants right now. Like that's every day for me. But yeah. So, but then again, the travel has slowed down, and that's just kind of a bummer because it's a really fun thing to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's always like a pleasure to go to a place on a plane and meet fans of your game and be able to connect with them and kind of get the vibe they're feeling about your games because despite the fact that I can get into a bubble. All these game developers, we can get into bubbles because we are working with these games and we get so into them that we kind of lose track of what people think. And it's good to like go out and talk to people and hang out at convention centers and see what people are feeling about our games. Yeah.
So you you do things outside of Finji. I know there's a local organization there in Austin that is with indie development. Could you tell me about that?
Sure. Yeah. I work with a nonprofit arts collective called, it formerly was called Juegos Rancheros, which is a play on Huevos Rancheros, the breakfast dish, but Juegos being Spanish for games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're working on rebranding right now. So it's not going to be called that soon. But yeah, it's a small organization dedicated to the discovery and promotion of small video games that like aren't getting enough attention. So that can be things like, oh, this game developer is one person who's like working on this really small passion project, and we want to put it on a stage in front of people and get people talking about it. And so this is done through monthly meetups that we were doing pre-COVID, where you would go to a venue and hang out and eat some snacks and check out cool games that you had never heard of and play video games that you've never heard of with strangers or friends and kind of just hang out in this weird half art gallery, half arcade space.
Mm.
Um, and it's a really really fun thing, and it's a really great way to like learn about what's going on in the video game world. I went as a just a college student, and it was really cool to like see these video game creators who I didn't know lived in my city giving talks and talking about their game and sharing their game. And these are people that like I admired and really looked up to, and now we're friends because of this organization. And yeah, Juegos, and it's we also had a yearly event called the Fantastic Arcade, where we would rent out a movie theater for a week and just kind of do that monthly meetup on a much bigger scale for a whole week, and people would come in and out, and we'd get people from all over the world coming in to hang out. And yeah, it's a wonderful thing that I dedicate a few hours to every week of my free time to like help the community. And I really really appreciate what it did for me. So to give back to that is something that I feel really good about.
So how do you balance different things? Because, or I guess more so the greater question is, what is your work schedule like? Because it sounds like this is an ongoing
Yeah.
process. It's not a 5 day a week process. I'm on Twitter. I see you guys tweet every now and then on the weekends.
Yep.
So I know there's scheduling, but can you tell me what is your schedule like?
The There's a lot of bad things about the internet, but one of the worst things is that it never turns off. Um, and so because of that, sometimes I can feel like my work never turns off. I manage a Discord, a Twitter account. There's the Steam forums. There's this. There's that. There's so many different ways that people can be talking about our games and looking for answers from us,
Mhm.
and ways that we could talk to these people. That sometimes it can feel like I am like not hitting every single channel on time perfectly. Something gets left out, this and that. Big game studios will have multiple people for this job so that this kind of thing can be avoided. But with a small studio like ours, we don't have the capacity for that. So I have to really challenge myself and keep myself accountable to put my phone down, close the laptop, and be okay with disconnecting. After a certain time every night or on the weekends. Recently, I took a trip with my girlfriend, and the number one goal was to just turn my phone off for 4 days. And I did, and it was the greatest vacation ever. Like I could have just, you know, gone and checked into a hotel down the street and left my phone at home, and it would have been just the same, like, satisfactory feeling. But yeah, it's a blessing and a curse working from home, because on one hand you get to work from home and wear your pajamas, and if you want to take a break you can play your own video games instead of sitting in a break room. But on the other hand, you're sleeping in the office and you're waking up in the office every morning and you live at work. So yeah, it is a delicate balance, that even I'm about to come up on 3 years with Finji, and even 3 years in, I'm still learning limits and how I can take self care and things like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, it is a very delicate thing, definitely.
So, is there anything unique to consider for people who are interested in going into your career or into that industry?
Video games is a very competitive industry. It's a very it's a very specific industry. If you're going to work in video games, you have to like know video games really well. You have to like know history and why this game succeeded and this game failed. Um, and so, I give this advice to people I talk to looking to get into games, is to just know everything you can about the industry you're getting into as you get into it, before you get into it. And that's good advice for business as a whole. If you want to sell music, if you want to be in real estate, if you know the city that you want to work in, just taking free time and you know spending it researching. And in video games, researching can be playing video games, but having a critical eye while you're doing it is the important part. You have to know why this game is good or why this game is important. And you know as I went through college in my game department before I got out of it, a lot of peers, a lot of students around me, they liked video games and they were really, excited about video games, but their knowledge of video games was very limited to the experience they had and not video games as a whole. And that kind of like held them back. They were coming at it from a perspective of, I've only ever played Call of Duty and I want to work on Call of Duty.
Mhm.
And that's fine. But if you don't nail the Call of Duty job, what are you going to do? Like, you have to be able to kind of adapt within that. So, I mentioned how like I have to research the heck out of video games if I want to work in video games. If for some reason I can't work in video games anymore, I've kind of pushed myself into the realm so much that like it's going to be hard for me to, go to another business. But thankfully, I haven't narrowed it down too much within video games. And if I, you know, if God forbid Finji were to close or something, which it's not, but I could hop to another studio because I know video games as a concept rather than just like one video game.
Mhm.
So if there's anyone watching this who very specifically wants to get into video games, I would say, um, be open about video games. Uh, you know, don't it's okay to be a fan, but don't dunk on things because it's not your interest, because one day you might be working on that thing.
Mhm.
um listen to a weekly gaming podcast. I listened to a lot of games podcasts when I was in middle school and high school, and like getting that information drip fed to me, I would like listen to it on the school bus. And that was just like my morning and afternoon thing, was listening to the podcast. And because of that, I started my games career with a 8-year contextual history that really helped me. um, so for that, I recommend giantbomb.com's podcast. They're pretty good at that. And yeah, just be as prepared as you can be. Don't let it burn yourself out by doing too much. Don't take away time for your enjoyment. But if you enjoy playing video games and you want to work on them one day, try to absorb as much as you can. If they had Xbox Game Pass around when I was, in school, I
Yes.
would be a member of that and just be trying to play every single game I could play on that, because variety and like knowing the medium of games is just crucial to
Mhm.
like being able to talk about games and hold your own in the business.
Awesome. So I have well, not necessarily a question, but we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here.
Okay.
But is there anything that you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to plug? I know you're kind of already plugging Night in the Woods with the cap right there,
Yeah.
but the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just if you'd like to check out Finji games, we would love for you to play them. I feel really good about promoting Finji video games to a high school audience, because these games have, there's nothing I wouldn't want y'all to see in these games. There's no violence, there's no you know imagery that I wouldn't feel good about promoting. So Night in
Mhm.
the Woods is a great game, especially as the subject matter is really powerful when you're
Mhm.
in school. Um, we also made just fun little games like Wilmot's Warehouse, Overland. All these games you can buy on most consoles. We got an upcoming game called Tunic, which is really neat. And some other new ones that we have not announced yet, which I'm not going to talk about. But in terms of anything I want to promote, just like go play some video games. Go look at an aspect of your life that you enjoy and ask yourself, could I, you know, add myself to this and be happy and make that a career? Because chances are you can. I grew up in a environment that my hobby was always a hobby and never looked at as a viable career path, and I kind of rejected that idea, and I was convinced that I could make this my career. So if there's one big thing I could promote from all of this, is that you should look at the thing you enjoy doing, and if it's healthy and productive for the world, see if you can insert yourself into that and make that your career. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Harris. It was awesome having you on here. Yeah. Take care.
Thank you.